Baseball ASMR. Hello, welcome back to Baseball ASMR, a channel where we talk about baseball in a relaxing way. I just did a MLB Season Preview video for the NL, and now I'm going to do one on the AL. So without any further ado, let's just dive in. This time I thought I would again start out west, but instead of going in order of best odds to worst odds to win the division, I would go in reverse order to make it a little more interesting. So starting in the AL West with the worst odds, you can probably guess it's the Angels, or the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And they are plus 4,000 to win the AL West. Players in: starting pitchers Tyler Anderson, Alek Manoah, former Blue Jay, and Grayson Rodriguez. Outfielder Josh Lowe, and relievers, that's a P. Relievers Kirby Yates, Drew Pomeranz, the lefty, Jordan Romero, another former J, and Brent Suter, and also infielder Vaughn Grissom. Players out: third baseman Anthony Rendon, who it was recently announced will not be playing for the Angels this season, though they will be paying him. This is his final year, but they're going to spread it out over a few years to make it hurt less like the rest of his contract. Outfielder Taylor Ward left. Relievers, why do I keep writing two R's? That's a P. Relievers Kenley Jansen, Luis Garcia, Andrew Chafin, Mustache Man, and Brock Burke. And starting pitcher Kyle Hendricks, and infielder Luis Rengifo. So they've had a fair amount of movement here, pieces in, pieces out, but still they're not expected to be great. I mean, it's been 10 years, if I can spell years, of sub 500 baseball. They have squandered the prime of Mike Trout, one of the best players to play the game, one of the best in recent memory. And they turned in yet another underwhelming offseason this past year. They traded Ward for Grayson Rodriguez and signed the reclamation project Alek Manoah, who I think spent last year in the minors, to help the rotation. And then they brought in some bullpen arms to make up for losing Kenley Jansen. And then they re-signed their third baseman, Yohan Moncada, now that they're finally free of Rendon. But all the savings from not paying Rendon the full amount this year, they didn't reinvest that. Every new contract is under $5 million. And they're all for 1 year, including new manager and former Angel Kurt Suzuki, which is very strange to have a manager working on a 1 year contract. Doesn't inspire a lot of faith with the players. There's just no vision with this franchise. And why? Well, 2 words: Artie Moreno. He's not a good owner. He spoke to the media recently and said that they polled fans, the organization did, and that winning was not their top priority, which is kind of crazy. He also declined to make the poll public and show people what it said. He failed to put a winning team around Mike Trout and the best two-way player since Babe Ruth and Shohei Ohtani. They lost Ohtani and they went for it that year, which was nice, but I don't even think they made the playoffs his final year, and then got nothing for him. Of course, didn't re-sign him. They've done nothing with Mike Trout. They haven't made the playoffs. When was the last time they made the playoffs? 12 years ago. So they won a World Series this century. That's great, but this guy has pretty much shown he's not a great owner. He can't really run a successful club unless you only count success in dollars, which I'm sure he does. So sorry, Halos fans, this is not your year. But until then, you can remember 2002 with fond memories, and hopefully soon Artie Moreno will no longer own your team. Next are the not Sacramento A's. They're just the Athletics. They don't want to be called the A's or the Sacramento A's, but I'm just going to call them this because it's fun. They are plus 1,300, so the odds are much better than the Angels. Players in for the A's. They've got second base outfielder Jeff McNeil from the Mets. Starting pitcher Aaron Civale. Relievers, former Yankee Mark Leiter Jr. and Scott Barlow. Players out. Reliever Jose Leclerc. I think he's a starter, but he might be a reliever. Sean Newcomb. I think he does both, maybe, like Ryan Yarbrough for the Yankees. Outfielder J.J. Bleday is gone. And that's all the players in and out. So what's up with the A's? They have a great young core, and they are locked up for the most part. They have locked down Lawrence Butler, Nick Kurtz, Shea Langoliers, Brent Rooker, Tyler Soderstrom, and Denzel Clark. Actually, I don't know if they all have extensions, but that's a good young core that they can build off of. They've also added, I forgot to add this. I think this year he's playing first base, Max Muncy. They've added him and Jeff McNeil as a veteran presence in the clubhouse. But, the pitching. And it's not so much the pitcher's fault. They play in a AAA ballpark, so it's not very big, and it's easy to give up home runs and runs. So it's been really bad for the pitchers while also helping the lineup. 0 starting pitchers in 2025. Had an ERA that started with a 3. That's pretty bad. They traded away all-star closing pitcher Mason Miller, who has been dazzling in the World Baseball Classic. This is recorded before the final, so who knows how he did in the final. Hopefully well. Hopefully the U.S. won. They're going with the A's, after trading him, are kind of going with a closer by committee situation. To be honest, they need to get to Las Vegas already. Not that they're not building a good team and starting to play better and spend more money, but they need the dimensions of a major league park to help their pitching. And it will also help their whole branding situation. but they don't move until 2028. So they've got this season and one more before they go. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to try to hit their way to a better record. Last year they were 76 and 86. I don't know how much better they're going to do this year, but with the young core and some veterans, they'll be fun to watch, and they will steal games, and they are a tough out. They're a good young team. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they can play the spoiler a lot this year, especially in the AL West, with the Mariners and Astros ahead of them, and the Rangers, and other teams in the AL and NL. I think they'll be an interesting team to watch this year. Next in the AL West, then third highest odds to win the AL West are the Texas Rangers at plus 340. Players in. They've got starting pitcher Mackenzie Gore, outfielder Brandon Nimmo from the Mets, catcher Danny Jansen, another starting pitcher Jordan Montgomery, who was on the team when they won the World Series, also a former Yankee. Relievers Alexis Diaz, Jacob Junis, Tyler Alexander, and Carter Baumler. Never heard of that guy, but good for him. And the old stalwart third baseman Andrew McCutchen. Players out. Second baseman Marcus Semien in the Nimmo trade. Outfielder Adolis Garcia, who was so hot during their World Series win. Starting pitchers Merrill Kelly, John Gray, Tyler Mahle, and Patrick Corbin, if you remembered he was still playing. And then relievers, Phil Maton, Danny Kalum, the lefty, I think, Hobie Milner, Sean Armstrong, and Jacob Webb. And first baseman Rowdy Tellez, and catcher Jonah Heim. So that's a lot of players in and out. A lot of roster turnover after a few years of middling results. So they won the World Series in 23 and then missed the playoffs in 24 and 25. So you could argue that this was a good idea to shake up the roster and see what's what. I would agree. But will this solve the issues? Well, they're hoping that Gore figures it out. Montgomery just had TJ, so they're hoping he can get back to, the mid to like number 2, number 3 starter status that he was. They're also hoping that Kumar Rocker, the guy with the long saga to get to the MLB, they hope he can finally fulfill his promise. So those three, along with Jack Leiter, can fill in the rotation behind DeGrom and Eovaldi, but health is always a question mark for those two guys, plus Monty. We don't know what we'll get out of him this year for the Rangers. Similar to the rotation, so they've got starting pitcher health questions, and then the lineup, they're hoping Gore can unlock stuff. The lineup, they're hoping that Nimmo can help relieve pressure on the top two guys, Corey Seager and what's his name? Wyatt Langford. So I was doing research, and one writer compared Seager and Langford on the Rangers to Aaron Judge and Juan Soto on the 2024 Yankees, and how much that the team depends on them, and if they don't play well, then the team really doesn't do well. So they're hoping that Nimmo can help take a little pressure off for Seager and Langford. And then behind those two, you've got Jake Berger, Jock Peterson, whatever he has left in the tank, Evan Carter, and Josh Young. So it's an interesting mix of veterans and a few young guys, and youngish veterans who have shown potential. But yeah, they're hoping these new pieces can help out, like any team, of course. They've treaded water the past few years, and everything is, all their moves this offseason are sort of banking on upside and or are solid veteran ads. There's a world where they can make the playoffs. Could be a wild card team, but I think it's more likely that they miss the playoffs this year. Only time will tell. Maybe these moves really come together and they prove me wrong, but it's been 3 straight years of what's going on here. Well, 2 straight years of what's going on here. They don't want to make it 3. Next, in odds for the AL West, of course, you have the Houston Astros. Not favored to win if you're counting. They have the second best odds. They're plus 250. Players in, they have, hold your horses here, Tatsuya Imai from the MPB, Mike Burrows, Nate Pearson from the KBO, Kai Wei Teng, sorry, that's an I, and Ryan Weiss. So they brought in all these starting pitchers. They've also brought in outfielder Joey Loperfido and infielder Nick Allen. And who are they replacing? Starting pitchers Framber Valdez and Luis Garcia. Utility player Mauricio Dubon. Outfielders Chas McCormick, Jacob Melton, and Jesus Sanchez. Third baseman Ramon Urias. Catcher Victor Caratini. Relievers Craig Kimbrell, still pitching, didn't know that, and Caleb Ort. And finally, infielder Brendan Rodgers. So, a lot of players in, a lot of players out, mostly starting pitchers in. One of the bigger free agent starting pitchers they signed this offseason, Tatsuya Imai from the MPB, which makes sense given that they lost the best free agent on the market, Framber Valdez, and of course Luis Garcia. So they're in an interesting position this year. They went 87-75 last year and missed the playoffs for the first time in what seems like forever. Part of missing the playoffs last year was they had some injuries to their pitchers. They lost Ronel Blanco, Hayden Wesneski, and Brandon Walter to season-ending surgery. And then this offseason, when they lost Framber Valdez, it made sense for them to focus on bringing in more starting pitching. And like I said, it's headlined by Imai, who didn't want to join his fellow Japanese countrymen on the Dodgers, Otani, Yamamoto, and Sasaki. and he came to Houston because he said he'd rather beat the Dodgers than join them. And that's the kind of attitude that they're going to need to retake the West from the Mariners. Burrows and Pearson are also solid adds to the rotation. Burrows and Pearson, solid, but it cost them their two best prospects. And starting pitcher Anderson Brito and outfielder Jacob Melton. And for a farm system ranked 27th, and they recently lost their GM, manager, scouting director, and farm director. It weakens these moves that where they lost their prospects, weakens an already frail part of the organization, especially at a time now when they are going through some roster turnover. All that's to say is that it's not just one trade or 1 year of missing the playoffs that spells doom or the end of dominance for the Astros, but the cracks are starting to show in the foundation. As the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day, and in this case, it was built on the back of a decade of high-round draft picks. And likewise, Rome didn't crumble in a day. When it fell, it slowly decayed over time, until the barbarians were able to sack the city and hold it for ransom. And I guess in this terrible metaphor, the Mariners are the Visigoths for your history nerds. But all that said, they still have the second best odds to win the West. They were only 3 games out of first last season. And they only missed a wild card spot due to a tiebreaker. So if they've got Altuve, Alvarez, and the return of Correa Part 2, since he left and came back, they can power the offense, and the rotation still has Hunter Brown, Christian Javier, and Lance McCullers. And the bullpen is still solid with Brian Abreu, Brian King, and Aniel De Los Santos, and of course Josh Hader at the back, although he starts the year on the IL. They have a good core. It's a little older. They've brought in some pitching to help. But the Astros are still the Astros, in my opinion, until proven otherwise. Last year might have been a little bit of a blip, or it might have been the start of the end. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because they have proven to be able to replace great players. You know, they lost Verlander, Cole, Greinke, and they still kept going with Valdez and Ronel Blanco and all these other younger pitchers, McCullers, Hunter Brown. The lineup is fairly right-handed. And as Ken Rosenthal has been repeating for weeks, they have an infield logjam, but he thinks it's the best idea to solve both problems by trading Isaac Paredes for a left-handed outfielder, which would be good. And it seems like maybe the Red Sox are a good trade partner, but we will see what happens there. What they really need is a full season of Yordan Alvarez, who is constantly hurt. Not constantly, but he's hurt almost as much as Giancarlo Stanton for the Yankees, which is to say he plays like 2/3 of a season or less sometimes. And they need some positive steps forward from younger position players to overcome a weak offense last year. They were 21st in runs last year. That's pretty bad, especially if they want to be a playoff team. So if they can have some steps forward in a full year of Yordan, and the starting pitchers can emerge as good mid to back rotation pieces behind the established guys, they'll be back in October, no problem. I think they're definitely a wild card team. I think they're primed for a rebound. I think they want to get back to the playoffs, and they have good fans in a good park. As much as I, decry the trash can incident and the Yankees losing to them in the 2017 ALCS, they still are a top 10 organization, in my opinion. So I think they will be back in the playoffs this year. And lastly, in the AL West, our number one team, of course, is the Seattle Mariners, plus 100 to win the division. It's not a ton of room in between them and the Astros at plus 250, but they are favored. Players in, they have infielder Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals, reliever Jose A. Ferrer, outfielder Rob Ref Snyder from the Red Sox. Players out. Second baseman and clutch hitter in the playoffs, Jorge Polanco. Third baseman, Eugenio Suarez. And catchers, Mitch Garver and Harry Ford. Last year, the Mariners won their first AL West crown in 24 years. They were one game shy of the World Series. And because of that, they thought they didn't have to make a lot of moves. And honestly, I kind of agree with them. So they re-signed their first baseman and surprise base stealer, Josh Naylor, and made a slew of minor moves. And they certainly do lack a very good backup catcher behind Cal Raleigh because they lost both Mitch Garver and Harry Ford. And they lost Logan Evans for the season, which hurts. But if those are your main concerns as a team, you may not know how good you have it. The number 3 pick in the draft last year, Cade Anderson, may be able to come up and help the rotation. But is it really necessary? I mean, their rotation is one of, if not the best in the game, with Brian Wu, Logan Gilbert, you know the names, Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and a few others behind them. I mean, they've been maybe the best top 4 for several years, and they'll once again be the strength of the team. They have a deep lineup, obviously with star catcher Cal Raleigh. Is it A? No. Raleigh. Of course, Julio Rodriguez, Josh Naylor, Randy, the best to ever do it, Arozarena, and Brendan Donovan. So that's still a pretty good lineup right there, pretty deep. You know, they've got J.P. Crawford and others too behind them. The pen has gotten better behind Andres Munoz. They still got Munoz. They brought Ferrer in, and he joins the trio of Matt Brash, Eduard Bazardo, who I believe is pitching for Venezuela in the WBC, and Gabe Spire, and all of them had sub-3 ERAs last year. Brash, Bazardo, and Spire. I know ERA is not the best stat for relievers, but that's a pretty good sign. They can easily win the West for a 1 or 2 seed. Definitely, I see them as a very strong team, and probably getting a first round wild card round bye. They're right up there with like the Blue Jays, Red Sox, and Tigers as teams I'd least like to face in the playoffs this year. That does it for the West. Let's move to the Central. Worst odds in the Central, you could probably guess, are the Chicago White Sox. Plus 3,500 this year to win the Central. Players in, interestingly enough, third baseman infielder Munetaka Murakami from the MPB. Starting pitcher Anthony Kay. Relievers Sir Anthony Dominguez and Jordan Hicks, who also sometimes is a starter, I think. Outfielder Austin Hayes and second baseman Luis Angel Acuna from the Mets. Players out. As you know, probably, Luis Robert Jr. is the number one guy out. Also starting pitcher Martin Perez. So not a whole lot of movement for these people, but surprisingly interesting roster. Or at least I thought so when I was going over it to do this video, do my research for this video. They're definitely not playoff bound. But should hopefully not be historically bad. It's a very low bar to clear, but, they were 41 and 121 in 24 for the worst record of all time. So it's a long way to go to move up and win the division or even a wild card. But they should be an interesting young roster this year. If you watched my NL video, I will compare this team a little bit to the Pirates in that they are a perennial cellar dweller, but they could show some real growth this season. Just the big difference between the Pirates and the White Sox is that the Pirates actually have a chance to make the playoffs, where I don't think the White Sox do. They would really have to do make a lot of surprising. They would have to have a lot of players take surprising steps forward or rebound and prove themselves, which is not impossible. I just don't think it very likely. Next in the AL Central in terms of odds are the Minnesota Twins. They are plus 900 to win the Central this year. Players in. Relievers Anthony Banda, Eric Orz, Taylor Rogers, and first baseman Josh Bell. Oh, there's two of them. Josh Bell and Eric Wagaman. Catcher Victor Caratini. And two catchers, Caratini and Alex Jackson. Players out. Not counting the trade deadline last year where they traded some players away. Infielders, Edouard Julien, the Frenchman, and Mickey Gasper. Outfielders, Dashawn Kiersey Jr., and Carson McCusker. First baseman Jose Miranda. Starting pitchers, just one starting pitcher, Pearson All, and catcher Christian Vasquez. So some moves around the edges here, but after a few seasons of not being super competitive, What are they up to? We're not sure exactly what the Twins are up to. They have a new owner. They fired manager Rocco Baldelli, who was there for a little while. Seemed like he was setting a culture. And then last year, with the past few trade deadlines, they got rid of some good players. Joan Duran, Willie Castro, Carlos Correa, Griffin Jacks, Brock Stewart, Ty France, Louis Varlin, Harrison Bader, Chris Paddock, and Danny Kalum. They still have Byron Buxton on Team USA in the WBC, Joe Ryan, and Royce Lewis, and a few other good players. And the AL Central will be competitive. They'll be a little competitive. But overall, they're just on the outside looking in right now. And I, especially after their ace, Pablo Lopez, is getting Tommy John and is out for the year and part of next year. So overall, it's just not a really high caliber roster. They've had a lot of turnover. It's not really certain what is going on with ownership and the building of the roster and the culture and everything. They're kind of in a bit of flux. I guess if I have to make a prediction, they will finally trade Joe Ryan at the deadline this year because they will be out of playoff contention. And hopefully whatever they get back can help them be a playoff contender again next year when they get Pablo Lopez back from surgery and they can be a good team again. Next in the odds for the AL Central, if you have watched baseball the past few seasons, you may be surprised to learn that this team is not favored to win the division, since they have done so well recently. If you're counting along, the third best odds for the AL Central belong to the Cleveland Guardians at plus 425. Players in, they've got relievers Sean Armstrong, Connor Brogdon, Colin Holderman, and Peyton Pallett, and catcher Austin Hedges. Players out. Outfielders John Kenzie Noel, The Big Christmas, Will Brennan, and Lane Thomas. Relievers, Nick Enright, Sam Hentges, Jacob Junis, Zach Kent, and starting pitcher John Means. So this offseason, J-Ram, 4 years, $106 million in new money and $10 million deferred annually. And yet the opening day payroll this year is expected to be $65 million. Even though they were at the bottom of offensive metrics last year. The 2025 Guardians, they had an 87 WRC plus, and if you know stats, the plus means 100 is league average, so they were 13% below league average. They were 28th in WRC plus, 643 runs, and they had poor numbers in average, on base, and slug. So not a good offensive team last year. With minimal outside help coming in, they are counting on Kwan, Moving over to center field and shining, and for prospects to step up. People like Travis Bazzana, who played for Team Australia in the WBC, George Valera, Chase DeLauter, Juan Brito, and Cooper Ingle. The rotation lost Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie in recent years, but they've still got Gavin Williams, Tanner Bybee, Logan Allen, Parker Messick, Slade Ciccone, and Joey Cantillo. So they've got some depth. They just need people to step up in the lineup and the rotation, and I think it's possible. The pen, they lost Clase and Ortiz to the gambling allegations, and they're basically on suspension while this is figured out. And recently their case was delayed 6 months, so it seems like they're probably going to miss the whole season. And then whatever happens after that, if they're found guilty or whatever, they might just be done in MLB. So can the bullpen losses and all-star closer, one of the best pitchers in the game in Clase, can losing him and Ortiz be overcome with the guys they brought in? Yeah, it's possible. But what about the lack of offense? They really need these young guys to step up. There is a world where they do, and the pen clicks and the rotation comes together, and they win the Central, and they're really competitive. To me, it's kind of like 50-50 to make the playoffs. And that's not a knock on them. It's basically because I think this year, after several years of probably 5-10 years of people saying this, the AL East is such a difficult division, but I think this year 4 of the teams took steps forward in the offseason of differing amounts. So that division might have 2 or even 3, all 3 wild cards coming from that division. So that doesn't really leave a lot of room for the other divisions to have wild cards. But all that said, the Guardians consistently outperform expectations. They always have a low payroll and yet are always in the mix. They have grit. They just kind of get it done in like a Midwestern sort of way. So I would never bet against them making the playoffs. They're always punching above their weight. And the second best odds in the Central belong to the Kansas City Royals. They're plus 225. Players in: outfielders Lane Thomas, Isaac Collins, Cameron Meisner, and Starling Marte. Relievers: Alex Lang, Nick Mears, Matt Strahm of the Phillies, and Mitch Spence. Players out: Randall Grichuk, the outfielder. Oh, and also Mike Yastrzemski, as well as MJ Melendez. Starting pitchers: Michael Lorenzen, who pitched valiantly for Team Italy, Michael Lorenzen, and Kyle Wright. Relievers: Angel Zerpa, Hunter Harvey, Jonathan Bolin, and Taylor Clark. And of course, also second baseman Adam Frazier is gone. So the rotation: is solid, as it has been for several years. It's led by Cole Reagans and Michael Wacha. Also has Chris Bubich, who had a very good season last year before getting hurt, as well as Seth Lugo and Noah Cameron. The back end of the pen is also solid. They've got Carlos Estevez, Matt Strom, and Lucas Ersig holding it down. And the main question, as it has been for a few years, is the lineup. They've got perennial MVP contender Bobby Witt Jr., the newly extended Michael Garcia, who is playing for Team Venezuela. They've got the Pasquatch, Vinny Pasquantino, Jonathan India, and Salve Perez, the only other catcher in the majors right now, other than Aaron Judge. But behind them, there are questions. The outfield is up for grabs. The outfield is kind of an open tryout this year, and as one or maybe even two platoons might happen out there for KC. They're also hoping that former top prospect Jack Caglione, oh God, I butchered that, Caglione. I don't know how you skip that N, but okay. Who also played for Team Italy. They're hoping he can lives up to his potential. So they need some steps forward on the offensive side, and they need some of these new additions to have better injury luck and production than a few of their past seasons. Also of note, Kauffman Stadium. Outfield walls are going down by 1.5 feet to help make the pitcher-friendly park a little bit more hitter-friendly. Last year they went 82-80. I'll just add that here. Are these minor moves enough to take the AL Central? They do have the second best odds because they have such good pitching, but I think they're a wild card team. That's kind of my prediction. I think either them or the Guardians will take a wild card. I don't know if the AL East is going to swing 3. It's never happened. Obviously, it's only been a few years where there are 3 wild cards in each league, but hasn't happened where one division has had all of them. And I think that continues this year with KC or Cleveland taking one of the AL wild cards, because I just think, on paper they don't look as imposing or intimidating as the Dodgers or the Sox or Yankees, these Cubs, these teams that spend a lot of money. But then when it comes down to it, they usually are competitive. I think the Royals or Guards will be there in October. And last, with the best odds to win the Central, as you probably guessed, is the Detroit Tigers at plus 110. So not that much daylight between them and the Royals at plus 225. Players in, they've got the best starting pitcher on the market this offseason, Framber Valdez, but they also brought back old-time Dodger Justin Verlander, and then relief pitchers Kenley Jansen and Johan Simon. Players out. Starting pitchers Jose Urquidy, Alex Cobb, and Chris Paddock. Relievers, Tight Pants Tommy Kahnle, former Yankee, he's a funny guy. Paul Sewald, Jason Foley, Chase Lee, and Rafael Montero. the Tigers equals reloaded. They're ready to win their first Central crown since 2014. Basically the Verlander-Scherzer era. They added the best starter on the market this offseason, Framber Valdez, to a rotation that features back-to-back AL Cy Young winner Tarik Skubal, also winner of the highest arbitration salary ever for a pitcher at $32 million this year. He's also an impending free agent. After an offseason of rumors of him being traded, they have decided to keep him and add and go for the Central in the playoffs this year, even if it means losing him in free agency next year. So they've got Valdez and Skubal as a 1-2 punch, and behind them they have Jack Flaherty, Casey Mize, and the homecoming of Justin Verlander, who seemed to figure it out in the second half last year after switching his shoes to Nikes or something. I don't remember. And both Verlander and Valdez have a familiar face in the manager and former Astros manager A.J. Hinch. They added Kenley Jansen to a solid bullpen featuring Will Vest, Kyle Finnegan, and others who contributed to the pitching chaos a few postseasons ago in 24. By the way, just a note for this season, Kenley Jansen is 24 saves shy of 500, which hopefully he'll reach this year if the Tigers are as good as they're supposed to be. I don't know how many pitchers have 500. I know Mariano and Trevor Hoffman do, so maybe like 5 or 10 guys do. So for him to get that many is pretty impressive, especially considering that he used to pitch on the Angels. But like KC, the lineup is the question. They have a slew of roughly 700 OPS players, which is good, but not great. It means they're deep, but they don't have the huge names. You know, they missed out this offseason on big bats like Bo Bichette, Alex Bregman, and Eugenio Suarez. So what they really need is Colt Keith and or Riley Green to step up. And if one of them does or both of them, then they're going to have a very good year in Detroit. If not, they might struggle a little bit, but the pitching is so good and the lineup is good enough that they will definitely make the playoffs. They also, like I said, they did not trade Tarik Skubal away, despite I'm sure they could have gotten some great things back in return, because they realized that the Central is not super strong this year. You know, Chicago's figuring it out. The Twins are taking a step back, and the Royals and Guardians have only made minor moves to strong but not incredible rosters. So by adding the best pitcher and making these other moves, they think that they can take the division and maybe even the AL, because they took the Mariners to a 5th game in the ALDS last year, and they had the best free agent pitcher. So why couldn't they, get to the ALCS or even the World Series this year? I would not want to face Detroit in the playoffs this year. Let me just say that. I guess if I had to predict, they are the Central winners. Unless there's some kind of crazy injury, of course, which is why we don't make predictions. And finally, that brings us to the AL East, which, like I said, could be the first division to send 4 teams to the playoffs in the new wild card era, the 3 wild card era. This season, the team with the worst odds to win the AL East are the Tampa Bay Rays, plus 2,500, which you'll notice is the best odds for the worst team in the division. I think that might be true for the entire MLB, not just the AL. I don't really remember the other odds, but the Rockies were plus 30,000. The Nationals, I think, were plus 10,000. And in the Central, the Cards maybe were plus 5,000 or 4,000. So this is pretty good. Doesn't mean they're going to win the East, but they are closer than other cellar dwellers. So players in, starter, reliever, Steven Matz and Nick Martinez. They've got infielder Gavin Lux and outfielder Cedric Mullins. Players out. They lost second baseman Brandon Lau, starting pitcher Shane Baz, outfielder Josh Lowe and Jake Mangum, fast guy, and reliever Pete Fairbanks. This season they're headed back to the Tropicana Field under new ownership, but they're still waiting on a new stadium, which is one of the last pieces that MLB wants to put in place before they expand and add 2 teams, kind of like the NBA just announced they want to add teams in Seattle and Las Vegas. MLB wants to add 2 teams. Obviously, the A's are moving to Vegas in baseball, so it would be somewhere else. But Rob Manfred, the commissioner, has said a lot that he doesn't want to do that until the A's and Rays stadiums were resolved, and only one of those 2 is so far. So going back to the Trop, at least for the time being, should help the pitching staff, because similarly to the A's pitching in the Yankees' George M. Steinbrenner Field, I think it's high A field the past year, really wasn't helping the pitching because a minor league park is too small. Plus, it's outside in Florida where the air is warmer, so balls travel further. But are they losing their edge? It used to be that with Andrew Friedman there in Tampa, they were the best at doing using analytics and bringing in players and trading and getting guys who were undervalued and retooling pitchers' arsenals and doing all sorts of changes to make players better on a budget. But now all the teams basically do that to varying degrees, including the ones that spend a lot of money on free agents to supplement those smaller moves or minor moves. So their edge might be gone. Plus, of course, they lost their franchise shortstop Wander Franco to his off-the-field issues. Something serious. We don't have to get into it, but that almost certainly upset their long-term trajectory. If I have to predict, they are out of the division by July and out of the playoffs in August. But that doesn't mean they'll be a terrible team. I think they'll be fun to watch. They're always fun to watch. The Rays play good baseball, and they always have interesting players on their roster. I just don't think they're a playoff team. Next, 4th best odds in the AL East. One of the teams that fans think have improved the most this offseason, the Baltimore Orioles at plus 425. Players in, of course, first baseman Pete Alonso. Starting pitchers Chris Bassett from the Jays. Shane Baz, who we just talked about from the Rays. And Zach Eflin. I think he was a re-sign. I'm not sure. Relievers Ryan Helsley and Andrew Kittredge. Outfielder Taylor Ward. shortstop, Blaze Alexander. I think he used to be a D-back. Players out. Starting pitchers, Grayson Rodriguez and Tomoyuki Sugano. Shortstop, Jorge Mateo. And catcher, Gary Sanchez. So the O's had surprise success in 23 and 24, but last year, so they didn't make a lot of moves last offseason because they had 2 good years, and they were gambling that the roster was solid enough to take them far in the playoffs last year. But the gamble didn't pay off, and not only did they not make the playoffs, they kind of took a step backward with their young core. So they took a different approach this offseason. They brought in some good veterans, especially Pete Alonso, to give some power to the lineup, which is something that they have been lacking. So they brought in him and a trifecta of solid mid to back end rotation arms, which was such a problem last year. And they also have a new manager in Craig Albernaz, who was manager of the year Stephen Vogt's associate manager in Cleveland. So they're hoping that shaking things up in this way helps lead them back to where they were 2 years ago. They need regression. Not backwards, I mean. Regression to the mean. They need their players who were good 2 years ago to get back to being good. And I don't think that that's too crazy of an ask because they've got Gunnar Henderson, who's playing well in the WBC. At shortstop, they've got Adley Rutschman. They've got Westberg at third. Jackson Holliday, they need him to become a major leaguer, a good major leaguer. And Colton Cowser in the outfielder. And Kobe Mayo at third, although he may go somewhere else. Westberg and Henderson are on the IL to start, so he'll probably play third. And then when Westberg gets back, I don't know. But with the added slug of Alonso and Ward, who they brought in, along with regression to the mean from their young guys and the solid rotation with the adds of one of these or 2 or 3 of them popping off, they, I will say, are likely a wild card team. They just have made a good roster better, and they just need better performance from some players. I don't think they're super far away from a wild card berth. They could possibly challenge for the AL East, although they've got 3 teams in front of them who spend more and have better rosters. It's not impossible, but, if they have winning records against the next 3 teams in the regular season, that will go a long way toward their success. Next, in terms of odds, for the AL East are the Boston Red Sox. Third best odds this year, plus 320. Players in, first baseman and catcher, Wilson Contreras. Starting pitchers, Sonny Gray, Ranger Suarez, and Johan Oviedo. Third baseman, Caleb Durbin from the Brewers. And infielder, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, former Blue Jay and Yankee and Pirate, right? And Ranger. Players out. Third baseman, Alex Bregman, who went to the Cubs. Starting pitchers, Richard Fitz, Brandon Clark, Dustin May, Hunter Dobbins, and Kyle Harrison. And I'm going to include Rafael Devers in the players they lost because it still is a factor. Reliever Jordan Hicks, Liam Hendricks, and Steven Matz. A fair amount of turnover here. But in the post-Devers world in Boston, the team ended up making the playoffs. Even without young star Roman Anthony. And they took my Yankees to the third game of the wild card series. And it took an electric start by a rookie pitcher, Cam Schlitzler, to put them away. So this year they've added Wilson Contreras to help play first and catch. And they get full seasons out of Tristan Casas and Roman Anthony after injuries kept them out of part/all of last season. And manager Alex Cora also recently praised Caleb Durbin, who finished third last year in Rookie of the Year voting in the NL. I don't know if he'll win the third base job, but they've got some good young players. They have a young core that has shown growth over the past few seasons and have added to it. And of course, and then after losing Mookie and Xander Bogaerts and then the Devers controversy, it's a good thing that the Red Sox are doing better with the young guys, because once that happened, then they acquired Garrett Crochet, and that was sort of a signal that they're ready to play with the big boys monetarily, at least. So Crochet leads the staff along with Brian Bayo, and then Gray, Suarez, and Oviedo in some order. I think I would say that the Red Sox are 100% a wild card team. They have a really good roster. I think they might be slightly undervalued because they're so young, and Casas and Anthony didn't play a lot last year. They have the third best odds here in the AL East, but they could just as easily be second because they're close in odds to the second, the next team, and also the number one team. They're all pretty close. We are coming up on the end here. We have the second best odds to win the AL East. And who do you think it is? It's the Toronto Blue Jays. I was surprised that they were second and not first after making the World Series and going all the way to Game 7. They are plus 250 to win the East. And they had a big offseason. They brought in starting pitchers, Dylan Cease, possibly the second best pitcher on the market this offseason. They brought back Max Scherzer, and also Cody Ponce, who was the 2025 Choi Dong-Won winner, the KBO Cy Young. They also signed third baseman Kazuma Okamoto, playing for Team Japan in the WBC. He was in the MPB last year. They brought in reliever Tyler Rogers and outfielder Jesus Sanchez. The players they lost, Chris Bassett, like I said, who went to Baltimore. They also lost, of course, Bo Bichette, shortstop. Relievers, Sir Anthony Dominguez. Infielder, IKF. And outfielder, Joey Loperfido. Arguably the best roster, top to bottom, in the entire AL. And they got better from last season, like I said, where they went to Game 7 of the World Series. They went to extra innings. They were 1 inning away from winning the World Series. They added a front-end starter in Dylan Cease. They added depth in Scherzer and Ponce. And they are looking forward to a full season of the young pitching revelation, Trey Savage, and his splitter that befuddled my Yankees in the playoffs and the regular season. They added a power bat in Okamoto to replace the loss of Bichette, and they also add Tyler Rogers to the pen. But can they turn their luck around? In the past 65 years, only the 2014 and 15 Kansas City Royals have won the World Series after losing it. One team in 65 years. But in their defense, they have contact. They have power. They have defense. They have base running, which is in increasingly short supply these days, it seems like, although the rules have helped people and teams and players steal more bags, it just seems like players aren't taught to run bases well, like going first to third and taking an extra base and reading hits and stuff like that. They're not taught those things as much anymore. But the Blue Jays are good at it. And of course, they also have pitching. They seemingly have everything. The lineup features superstar Vladito, George Springer, Nathan Lucas, Alejandro Kirk, Addison Barger, Okamoto now, Clement, Jimenez, and Dalton Varsho. The rotation now has a great 1-2 punch in Kevin Gossman and Dylan Cease. Behind them, they've got Trey Savage and Cody Ponce, along with Scherzer probably at the end. And Shane Bieber starts the year on the IL, but they also have Jose Barrios to fill in until he gets back. The pen is likewise very good, led by Jeff Hoffman, Tyler Rogers, Louis Varland, and Yimi Garcia, though he starts the year on the IL too. But they had my Yankees number last year in the regular season and in the postseason. And even though they finished with the same record, they then proceeded to stick it to the Yankees in the postseason. I think they swept them, or it was 4-1. So yeah, I was surprised to see the Yankees have better odds than them to win the AL East this year. I guess the Yankees, they do look good on paper, but I just feel like the Blue Jays have guys who play better baseball. They're more well-rounded, and they just want to win more, whereas the Yankees sort of try to get by more on talent rather than that ineffable thing of like competitiveness or clutch, things like that. I think they can win the AL East and get a 1 or 2 seed. I think they could be the best team in the AL this year again. I said it in my postseason preview video last year too. And last but not least, the best odds to win the AL East. How did we end up finishing with my team? I don't know how that happened. The New York Yankees, they're plus 180. So let me scroll back and just tell you here. The fourth best odds to win the AL East, the Orioles plus 425. Third best, Red Sox plus 320. Then the Jays plus 250. And finally the Yankees plus 180. There's less than 100 points between the Jays and the Yankees for the division, with the Red Sox and Orioles not far behind. That's how close the AL East is going to be this year, or at least the odds makers think so. Players in for the Yankees. Starting pitcher, Ryan Weathers from the Marlins. Relievers, Rafael Montero, and Angel Chivili, I think you say it. Hopefully Matt Blake can work his magic on him again, like he has done with so many bullpen arms, because they've lost relievers Luke Weaver, Devin Williams, Mark Leiter Jr., Ian Hamilton, Jake Cousins, and Jonathan Loaizaga, who I loved but was always injured. I didn't do this for all the other teams, because I don't think it's like re-signing guys is like just bringing back the same thing, but there's a reason I'm doing it here. Re-signed Cody Bellinger in the outfield, as well as Trent Grisham. Starting pitchers, Paul Blackburn and Ryan Yarbrough. First baseman, Paul Goldschmidt. And infielder, bench piece, I think he's a lefty killer, Ahmed Rosario. So, like I said, I haven't listed the re-signings in this video or the other video for the NL because the team isn't really getting better. They're just staying the same. But I did it here because it's 6 major pieces of the roster. And, people who follow the Yanks and talk about them are calling them the run-it-back Yanks this year because they're seemingly content with the roster. And, yes, they did finish tied with Toronto for the best record in the AL. But you could also argue they're not the best team in the AL because Toronto owned them in the season and the postseason. Like I said, it was a house of horrors. I think the Yankees went up to Toronto for Canada Day, a series there, and I think they got swept. I think that's in July. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was very embarrassing. This year, starting shortstop and subject of much debate, Anthony Volpe is out to start the year, 1 to 2 months. Gives an opportunity to former Ray Jose Caballero to take the job. It seems like it's a make or break year for him. It's his 4th year, and he kind of needs to be the prince who was promised. They missed out on all those guys. What was it, 3 off seasons ago, 4 off seasons ago? Corey Seager, Trey Turner, all those shortstops. Correa was one, I think. They didn't sign any because they said they have Volpe and Peraza, and now Peraza's playing first base for the Angels, and Volpe is barely league average in many ways, although he does have a Gold Glove. So he's out to start the year. Also, Cole and Rodon, the best 2 pitchers on the staff other than Max Fried, are out to start the year. Cole will come back sometime in May-ish, and then Rodon in June, and then we hope to get back Clark Schmidt in the second half, but we don't know when. So 3 of their best pitchers are out. That's why they brought in Weathers and re-signed Blackburn and Yarbrough for some depth behind Max Fried and the young guys, and Luis Heel, Will Warren, and Cam Schlittler, who will be in his first full season, I guess, which will count as his rookie year because of how much, I don't know how much he played last year. But their rotation is good. That's not the issue. The issue is the young guys needing to step up. Outfielder Jason Dominguez, this is a big year for him. They gave him the starting left field job last year, and he showed he couldn't really play defense. And he could really hit right-handed pitching, but could not hit lefties. So he's starting the year in AAA with the outfield set with Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, and Trent Grisham. But at the same time, Grisham is a bit of a question mark. His 2025 was his best by a lot. It differed from his career numbers quite a bit. So the question is, can he repeat that, or was it a blip on the radar? Apparently, he was a former high prospect, so clearly people used to think that this was possible from him, but it never really showed out when he was in pinstripes with the Padres. So the Yankees are banking on him repeating last year, which we don't know. The same for Cam Schlittler, who had a great postseason start against Boston, like I said in the wild card round. Can he be a frontline starter because he throws hard? Does he have to transition to the bullpen? Or is that Luis Gil's fate because he can't really control the zone? Speaking of controlling the zone, the pen is good. They have a good back end in the top three of David Bednar, Camilo Doval, and Fernando Cruz. But these last two guys have struggled to find the zone at times. Doval seemingly has gotten better with control at the end of last season and in the postseason, but Cruz struggled too, and it's hard to say. Relievers are so volatile year to year, and they brought some new guys in. They've lost a lot of guys. They're going to have to promote some guys from the minors. But if any aspect of the organization deserves the benefit of the doubt, it is the pitching staff, because Matt Blake, I forget his actual title. Is he the pitching coach or head of pitching development? He has shown that he's able to take pitchers of any quality and make them better by tweaking things, adding pitches, changing grips and arm slots and all that stuff. So he has been able to allow this team to spend elsewhere and then just bring in lower paid players in the bullpen because he can fix them and make them better. So there's a lot of questions. Even though it's the same roster, they won the AL. They co-won the AL last year, even though they lost because of the tiebreaker. They had the best record. They made the playoffs. They think they're good enough. I don't know if they are good enough to represent the AL in the World Series. I think they're definitely a wild card team, or they can win the AL East. Can they win the ALCS? That depends on a lot of injury health and progression from like Dominguez. What if Volpe turns it around? That would be great. They need Grisham to repeat his incredible year last year, but was an aberration. They need a productive season from Giancarlo Stanton, who is still playing through double tennis elbow and has recently been quoted as saying he can't open a bag of chips on his own because it hurts too much, but he can swing a bat apparently. So yeah, there's a lot of question marks. They can win the AL East, but as always, the Yankees are judged on October. So after losing in the ALDS last year and an embarrassing World Series loss in 2024, what does October 2026 look like for New York? That's going to do it for this AL preview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as the NL video or more. If you didn't, feel free to leave a comment. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And let me know if you have any ideas for future videos. As always, I take suggestions. That does it. Thanks for stopping by and watching the video. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.